The Phantom of the Western Front, when silence became a weapon. The scout's hands trembled as he scribbled his field report in the pre-dawn darkness of November 1917. Lautloses Flugzeug, silent aircraft. The words seemed absurd, even as his pencil scratched them across damp paper. Above the churning battlefield of the Western Front, where the constant drone of engines had become the acoustic signature of modern warfare, he had witnessed something that defied the fundamental nature of aerial combat, an aircraft that made no sound. His superiors dismissed the report as battlefield fatigue, perhaps auditory damage from artillery bombardment. But the scout knew what he had seen, or rather, what he hadn't heard. And within weeks, the Phantom would prove devastatingly real. The tyranny of sound. By late 1917, aerial warfare had reached a violent crescendo. The skies above France and Belgium thundered with the roar of rotary engines, the distinctive brap, brap, brap of Sopwith camels, the guttural snarl of Fokker triplanes, the deep throb of Gotha bombers. Sound had become both warning system and psychological weapon. Ground troops could identify friend from foe by engine note alone, and the approaching rumble of aircraft gave soldiers precious seconds to seek cover or man anti-aircraft positions. This acoustic reality created a fundamental vulnerability. Every aircraft announced its presence miles before arrival. The element of surprise, that ancient military advantage, had been surrendered to the mechanical necessities of powered flight. Reconnaissance aircraft were heard long before they crossed enemy lines. Bombers telegraphed their approach, allowing defenders to scramble fighters and prepare anti-aircraft batteries. The strategic calculus of aerial warfare was constrained by this unavoidable announcement of intent. German engineers at the Aviatik and Rumpler works understood this limitation intimately. They had spent years refining engine performance, strengthening airframes, improving armament. But the fundamental problem remained. Their aircraft were betrayed by their own power plants before they could complete their missions. Engineering silence. The birth of the Höhenflugzeug. The solution emerged not from silencing the engines, an impossible task given contemporary technology, but from placing them beyond the range of human hearing. If an aircraft could operate at altitudes where engine noise dissipated before reaching the ground, it would achieve practical invisibility in an era before effective radar. The concept was elegant, but brutally demanding. Achieving true high-altitude performance in 1917 required solving a cascade of engineering challenges that pushed the boundaries of aeronautical science. Atmospheric starvation. Above 15,000 feet, air density dropped precipitously. Engines designed for sea-level operation would gasp and sputter as oxygen content plummeted. Carburation systems needed complete redesign. The Mercedes D4A engine, selected for high-altitude reconnaissance aircraft, featured advanced altitude compensation, adjustable fuel mixture controls, and modified compression ratios that maintained performance in the thin air of the stratosphere. The cold crucible. At operational altitudes approaching 20,000 feet, temperatures plunged to minus 40 degrees Celsius. Lubricating oils thickened into useless sludge. Water-cooled engines risked catastrophic freezing. Rubber seals became brittle. Metal contracted, creating dangerous stress points in airframes. Engineers developed specialized cold-weather lubricants and redesigned cooling systems with glycol-based antifreeze. Innovations that would later prove crucial for aviation in polar regions. Human fragility. Pilots ascending into the stratosphere entered an alien environment hostile to human physiology. Oxygen deprivation caused confusion, visual distortion, and unconsciousness. Extreme cold penetrated multiple layers of leather and wool, causing frostbite within minutes. The cockpit became less aircraft and more survival chamber, requiring heated flight suits, oxygen delivery systems, and specialized instruments that could function in extreme conditions. The Rumpler C-7, which emerged from these development efforts in late 1917, represented a radical departure from conventional reconnaissance aircraft. Its fuselage was narrower, more streamlined. The wingspan stretched longer to generate lift in thin air. Every component was obsessively weight-optimized: thinner wood laminates, reduced armament, minimal ammunition. The aircraft sacrificed combat capability and payload for a single, revolutionary advantage. It could reach 24,000 feet and maintain station there for hours. At that altitude, its Mercedes engine was effectively inaudible to anyone on the ground, the unseen eye. The first operational deployments of the Rumpler C-7 created confusion that bordered on the supernatural. Allied positions that had been secure for months suddenly appeared in detailed German reconnaissance photographs. Artillery batteries, carefully camouflaged and positioned in rear areas, found themselves under accurate bombardment. Supply depots, communication trenches, troop concentrations, all were being observed and catalogued by an invisible observer. British and French anti-aircraft crews reported inexplicable events. Reconnaissance photographs showed their positions from directly overhead, yet no aircraft had been seen or heard. Fighter pilots scrambled to intercept the phantom observers found empty skies. The few who managed to spot the high-flying Rumplers discovered they couldn't reach them, struggling to 18,000 feet in their Sopwith Camels or Spad 13s. They watched helplessly as the German aircraft serenely continued its mission 6,000 feet above, a barely visible speck against the azure void. One British pilot, Captain James McCudden, described the frustration in his combat diary. "We climbed for 20 minutes, engines screaming at full power, only to watch the blighter drift overhead like a bloody cloud. My bus wouldn't go any higher, started shuddering something awful. The Hun just carried on, photographing our lines at his leisure. It's not warfare, it's humiliation." The psychological impact proved almost as valuable as the intelligence gathered. Allied troops, accustomed to the constant presence of enemy aircraft, now faced an adversary they couldn't hear, couldn't see, and couldn't engage. The sky itself had become untrustworthy. The strategic phantom. The Germans quickly recognized they had achieved something rare in the static warfare of 1917, a genuine tactical breakthrough. The Höhenaufklärer, high-altitude reconnaissance doctrine was formalized, with specialized units equipped exclusively with the Rumpler C-7 and its successors. These aircraft operated with a calculated efficiency that maximized their unique advantage. Missions were flown in optimal weather, clear skies where their altitude provided invisibility, but photography remained possible. Pilots were selected for cold tolerance and ability to function under oxygen deprivation. Routes were planned to overfly the most strategically valuable targets while remaining beyond the ceiling of Allied fighters. The intelligence gathered revolutionized German artillery effectiveness. Batteries could be positioned and targeted with unprecedented precision. Allied movements could be tracked in near real time. The static nature of trench warfare meant that once a position was photographed from high altitude, it remained current for weeks. Yet the technology contained inherent limitations. The extreme altitude that provided invisibility also constrained payload and operational flexibility. Cameras and film struggled in the brutal cold. Photographic resolution, while adequate for large installations, couldn't match the detail possible at lower altitudes. Most critically, the aircraft couldn't respond dynamically to tactical situations. Once committed to a high-altitude mission profile, they couldn't descend to investigate targets of opportunity without surrendering their primary advantage. The counter-evolution Allied response demonstrated the relentless cycle of military innovation. If they couldn't intercept the high-flying reconnaissance aircraft with existing fighters, they would develop new ones specifically for the task. The Bristol F-2C and experimental high-altitude variants of the SE-5 emerged with supercharged engines, extended wingspans, and stripped-down configurations. These specialized interceptors could reach 23,000 feet, still not matching the Rumpler's ceiling, but close enough to force German pilots into evasive maneuvering that compromised their reconnaissance effectiveness. Anti-aircraft doctrine evolved in parallel. Rather than attempting to shoot down the invisible aircraft, Allied gunners developed barrage tactics, filling specific altitude bands with shrapnel at predetermined times, forcing the reconnaissance aircraft to abort missions or risk flying through walls of exploding steel. Most effective, however, was the development of Allied high-altitude reconnaissance capabilities. By mid-1918, both sides possessed aircraft that could operate effectively above 20,000 feet, transforming the stratosphere into a new battleground where silent observers hunted each other in the thin, frozen air. Legacy of the Silent Phantom. The Rumpler C-7 and its contemporaries flew only briefly as uncontested masters of the high frontier, perhaps 6 months of true operational advantage before Allied countermeasures negated their superiority. Yet their impact resonated far beyond those months of invisible observation. They established fundamental principles that would define military aviation for the next century. Altitude as tactical advantage, the value of operating beyond enemy engagement capabilities, the integration of specialized reconnaissance with artillery and ground operations, the technical solutions developed for high-altitude flight, supercharging, pressurization concepts, oxygen systems, cold weather operations, became foundational technologies for commercial and military aviation. More philosophically, the silent aircraft of 1917 demonstrated that in warfare, sometimes the most powerful weapon is not the one that announces its presence, but the one that operates unseen and unheard. The German scouts who first reported the Phantom had witnessed not just a technological novelty, but a paradigm shift in aerial warfare. The sky had gained a new dimension, one where silence reigned and visibility meant vulnerability. It was a lesson that would be relearned with jet aircraft, stealth technology, and satellite reconnaissance. The observer who cannot be observed holds a profound and potentially decisive advantage. The Phantom had proven real, and the age of silent warfare had begun.